given that it started with this really sad news of the giant Ratan Tata passing, a giant in the true sense, in terms of leadership, in terms of responsible leadership. So we would start with a small little heartwarming tribute to him. I'm going to pass the mic to Santosh and to Varghese, and then we will start with our session. Santosh and Varghese, over to you.
Thank you, Sushmita. One of the vision statement that ODA we held closer for many years ago was helping leaders to build purposeful and successful organizations. And because mostly we felt that there is a dichotomy between success and purpose. While organizations could be chasing success, can organization be also purposeful? And to me, one of the leader who tried bridging these two together, where building organization which ranges from steel to software, but with the fundamental underlying theme of building organizations that are purposeful and successful. And in fact, even the vision statement of the group is about making a difference in the communities that we operate. So I don't think any other organization was were really able to bring purposeful and responsive to the communities where we operate. I don't think there is another organization which has such a large non-profit wing like a Tata Trust, which hugely involved in nation building. I don't think any organization would have dreamt about building inside something like an IAS cadre when Tata started TAS, Tata Administrative Service. So if you really look at from a culture perspective, from a purpose perspective, from responsive to the communities that we operate, this was an organization which had shown the paths, walked the paths, and hopefully continue doing that even with the absence of the torchbearer who possibly started all this. I had a great fortune of working with Rusi Modi when I just started my career in 1998. And Rusi Modi used to be, I think, head and the chairman of the Tata Steel. And those days, the claim to fame was there was no strike during his time, and the way he managed people. And that was the first time I got insight into the organization. And rest of us have heard about it, how they managed when there was terror attacks in Mumbai and Taj hotels, to generally the attitude towards people and building culture. So it's a sad loss. And I hope there will be more leaders who could hold the polarity between success and purpose and continue that path. So it's a really a sad moment for all of us today. Thank you.
Totally agree with I think what Santosh spoke about, Mr. Ratan Tata. We got up to this news this morning. I got up to this news this morning. Heartbreaking news, because for me as a leader, there were very few role models, especially at the size and the reach of what Ratan Tata has done for the country. There were very few leaders who stood out as an example. And he was one among them, exactly to some of the points that Mr. Santosh pointed out. His whole, value of giving to the community, of building the community. Now, he could have been a billionaire if he wanted to, long time ago, but the amount of, the profit that he has actually given back to the community talks volumes about the leadership value system that he holds. So for me, is, in the very top of role models, especially leadership role models. So I'll keep it at that, because some of the points that I have today, definitely I can, stitch it back to Mr. Ratan's life and the legacy he has left for each one of us to follow in our own workspaces, in our own leadership roles that we play. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. Thank you, Varghese. I just want to say this quote from Ratan Tata, which stands out, which also kind of encompasses what both of you said. And I have a question after that to both of you. He said at one point that if you want to walk fast, walk alone, but if you want to walk far, walk together. Which focuses a lot on taking care of communities of people. Do you think? And he was also very sharp strategically as a leader. That was also something which was really at the sharpest, if you see. But what do you think about his leadership? Do you think because he was able to really show that care for his people is why he was able to be so successful and make sure all the strategies that he had, etc., became so successful because of the foundation of the care that he showed towards his people?
Difficult questions all to you, Varghese.
So I think I have to learn from you. So, no, one of the points that I had in the presentation that I had for today is around collaboration, right? Together, we are always strong, right? And together is not an easy journey. It's a very difficult journey because there are new perspectives, new ideas, different, paradigm thinking that we get. But there is volumes that we can learn when we come together. And I think the whole idea, the quote that you just mentioned, Sushmita, from Ratan Tata, strikes that point of what the organization has done for this country and the number of people that it has given jobs and it has built their own leaderships over the course of the year is a clear pointer towards the whole idea of working together, right? Collaborative work culture. And that's critical because the whole silo work style is no more, the leadership talk today. It's all about how do we work together? How do we, even though we disagree with each other, it's okay. But coming together, coming to a common platform becomes very, very critical. Yeah.
Okay, I was just opening my mic. Thanks for that, Varghese. So on that note, I think I should introduce you because that really gives a good segue to, talk a little bit about you, introduce you to the audience, and then, open it up to further hear from you about leadership and how you see it. So one of the quotes that you have, which is almost on these lines, is that leadership transcends mere titles. It embodies a profound commitment to nurturing and guiding individuals to become valuable. Now, this statement is very valuable in the context, not just in today's context of Ratan Tata, but also in the larger context of what's been happening in corporate India, especially with, all the turmoil recently with, young employee losing her life and things like that. So I think we should talk a little bit more about that a little later. But it's a very profound statement from you, Varghese. So Varghese is a CHRO at FNF Private Limited, FNF India Private Limited. And what really struck me about Varghese, when I got to know about Varghese, is how multifaceted you are. So it's not just that you have this very successful corporate leadership career, which you really enjoy, but you also have a deep root in social justice and peace. So you've worked internationally in different spaces to build peace and social justice. Your international certifications, whether your master's degree, etc., are in those fields. So you have a social justice and intercultural relations from SIT Graduate Institute in USA, and also cross-cultural theology master's from Amsterdam. And you also earned yourself a peace fellowship working in that space, which is very interesting. Other than that, you're very passionate about sports. You really enjoy sports yourself. You also enjoy simple pleasures in life, which is you're speaking about long drives or fishing or reading, as simple as that. Firstly, where do you find time for all of it? But it also sounds like a whole, we talk a lot about work-life balance when we do our leadership trainings. And, these are all elements that come into it. Where are you as a leader in these spaces? And it seems like you have all these tick marked, and it seems like a, really nice, balanced lifestyle as well. So that was very interesting to read about you, Varghese. So tell us a little bit more about you, your view of leadership. How did you come into this diverse spaces, and how are you finding this? And are you now, when you're in the corporate space, narrowing yourself down to the corporate work, or are you still, quite spread out in the other areas as well? And how does that help you as a person and as a leader? So yeah, over to you. It would be lovely to hear more from you.
Thank you, Sushmita, for those wonderful words. So what I'll do is I'll start off with how did I come into this whole, leadership career over the years. I'll kind of tell a quick story about it, and then talk about what are some of the styles that I use in my leadership role. So there was a time when I was in Hyderabad back in 2000, 2001. I was part of this program, educational program, that I was a student. And there, there was this wonderful woman leader, Diane D'Souza. So she asked me, why don't I join a 3-week long leadership training? She thought it could be very useful for me. So I said, no problem, I'm more than happy to join. So as part of those 3 weeks leadership training program, learned a lot of aspects from that particular program. And then towards the end of the program, she came and asked, do you want to intern with us? I said, I was like, super excited. I said, I'm doing my studies, but definitely, I can do an internship so that, I can learn a lot more. So 6 months, I got into the internship program, and I was also doing my master's program. And as the internship was getting over, Diane again came to me and said, do you want to work with us? So, and that started off my first work experience. And I went all the way for 10 years working there and learned enormous aspects on leadership, on conflict transformation, on organizational development. And during that time, one thing that I realized, one of the main responsibility of a leader is to identify a potential person in your team to be the next leader, or to groom them as leaders. And I go back to Diane D'Souza today, because if she would not have identified me then, I think I would have had a totally different trajectory, unlike what I am in the current role. So her observation, her time to analyze where I stood and what I can definitely be good at in the years to come, and the enormous time that she gave me over the course of the years to groom me and get me to where I am today. So, I remember her at this point of time for her role in identifying another person who could become a leader, right? So that's the start of where my journey started from a leadership standpoint. But today, currently, I would love to talk about some of the things that I consciously, very, very consciously put into practice in my leadership role. When I work with a team, one thing is really important for me is, do we all know where we are heading, right? That's super important for me, because if we don't know where we are heading as a team, then you would find people in the team heading in multiple directions. And, that's very difficult to bring them together at a point where the leader envisions them to be at. So I spend quite a lot of time with my team talking about the vision and reframing those visions in multiple meetings in different ways, giving them example so that people are aware this is the game plan, this is where we are heading, and also to align their personal goals to the team goals or the organizational goals. Now, that's another very critical aspect, because if I don't do that, then what happens is sometimes the goals may not match, right? Probably they're wasting their time because their goals are not at all what the organizational goals are. So it's really important to help them align those goals, because there's a beautiful quote by Tony Robbins that I would like to read out. He says, setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. Setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. And that plays a very powerful role in my leadership style, is to align individual goals to team goals. Because once I do that alignment, then the rest of the journey becomes a lot more easier, a lot more faster, because this pretty much is the foundation to see where am I heading. So that's the first and the foremost thing that I would do in building a team and leading as a leader. The second aspect, which is also super important, is to build trust, because this element is probably misused in multiple organizations, and I've seen there's a mistrust in the organization, and people end up there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of backbiting that happens, and all of that happens because there is no trust in the organization or in the team. And whose responsibility is it to build trust? It is the responsibility of the leader. It begins with the responsibility of the leader. And again, how does that begin? The leader should be the first one to trust the team member, right? It's not the other way around, because many a times leader thinks it's the team member who should trust me, and that's not going to fly. It needs to begin with the leader. And when I say that, it means the leader should be approachable, right? Employees should be willing, or team members should be willing to come to the leader without any apprehensions, because the door is completely open and there's a conversation that happens. So building trust is a very critical aspect, because one of the survey also highlights this, and I would like to read the Harvard Business Review, that says workers at companies where trust is high, they report 106% greater energy in the office, 74% lower stress levels, and 76% greater engagement, and 50% more productivity than their peers at low trust businesses. So one thing is very clear: if there is trust, like I spoke about, if the team members are clear where they're heading as a team, as an organization, and if there is trust, if people are spending time to build that trust, then it becomes a lot more easier for us to head towards our vision. Peter Drucker, a management guru, says leadership is an achievement of trust. So it is the leader's ball game here on how do I build trust. And I think the leader needs to consciously look at these aspects. It's not trust building is not a one-time activity, right? It's a day in, day out, right? Daily conscious initiative. It could be sitting with team members, talking to them, giving a quick hi, going out for coffee, having lunch, having conversations. It all begins there. It begins with the common things. And then it goes to more probably difficult conversations where sometimes you got to have as a leader, but that becomes a lot more easier if there is enough trust that is built. And when we talk about trust, we're talking about very genuine conversations, right? Not a superficial conversations, because superficial conversations normally breaks trust. Because then the team member would be like, I don't trust my leader because I know he or she says, but that doesn't happen. And that's where the conversations need to be absolutely genuine, very open in building those trust. And I make it a point, and I work with my team and also with my customers, for that matter, with my internal customers. I spend a lot of time to ensure that, am I building trust with my team members? Are they open to come and talk to me about any issues? And are we ready for a wonderful conversations, and through which, we arrive at solutions, we arrive at results? So this becomes another very important bedrock for leadership foundation. One other thing that I, really help work with in my team is to do a continuous check on KSA. I call it as KSA. It's knowledge, skills, and attitude. Am I growing when it comes to my knowledge, right? Am I learning something new? Am I listening to people? That becomes a very important aspect, because many a times as leaders go up the ladder, there is very little listening that's happening, or listening is happening only at certain levels and doesn't happen at levels below. But I think as a leader, and this is something that I've put into practice and I've learned enormously through it over the years, is to take time to listen to your team members, because there could be a brilliant idea sitting with a team member. There could be a totally new perspective sitting with a new team member, or there could be a challenge that a team member has identified that needs your attention and needs a solution to come into picture. So by listening, that we are able to help. There is a wonderful saying: by talking, we don't learn anything new, because we talk what we already know. But by listening, we end up learning a lot of things, sometimes totally new things. And that's where a constant check on my knowledge, right? Am I learning? Am I growing? And I keep this with my team as well. I keep them asking the same question. And skills. Am I sharpening my skills? Am I acquiring new skills? Should I get trained? And these are questions I constantly check with my team. And at the same time, on attitude. Now, this is super important for me. Okay, right? We talk about leadership character. Now, this becomes integral for me for even deciding who needs to get onto the team. I always look for attitude, because if you have the attitudes checked in right at the beginning, your journey becomes a lot more easier. But sometimes, we have team members where certain attitudes need to be sharpened, and it's important for a leader to provide that platform for those team members to learn and to overcome some of those negative attitudes, and replace that with positive attitudes. And for all of this to happen, it's important they have a platform. It's important that there are people trying to help them and provide them the necessary support so that they are able to become a better human being, a better professional for the organization. Now, what I've done is I've put this part of their KPIs, right? It's not just their immediate work alone, but even on the attitude, I put that on their KPI. We look at different scenarios of how the person dealt with those scenarios. I know some could say this is very subjective, but if you dig a little deeper, you can get certain objective out of it. You can get certain data points out of it, where we can tell, hey, yeah, we have seen a huge difference in this person, even from an attitude standpoint, even from a skill standpoint, knowledge standpoint. So now this becomes very important, because if I don't learn as a person, then I'm derailing my entire learning process. My growth trajectory gets derailed if I don't learn. And I make it a point that this begins right from the leadership level, right? So at our organization, we have leadership trainings at the leadership level, at the vice president level, AVP level. There's intense program that they go through and projects that they themselves implement. And when other people down the line see this, they're excited because they also want to learn. They also want to go through different training programs. So we have seen that curve when the influence is actually coming from the top down. So that's the other aspect that I put into my leadership style. And the one thing that we spoke at the beginning, where when I was referencing Mr. Ratan Tata, is around the spirit of collaboration. Now, this is super, super important for me. Now, why do I say this? I would refer to a quote by Phil Jackson. He says, the strength of the team is each individual member, and the strength of each member is a team, right? So it's so important that we got to work together. And one thing that I constantly, try to avoid is the silo work culture, because that's not going to get us anywhere. We live in a world, we live in a community, we live in a family where there's constant conversations that are happening, constant discussions that are happening, and we need one another. We need one another to grow, right? So this is something that we have constantly put as one of the bedrocks of our team's foundation, is to collaborate. We ensure that our team members spend valuable amount of time. There was a time, in an organization that I worked, there were people who were not talking to each other, and they were sitting next to each other. There were emails passed back and forth, and I'm like, hey, why don't you just talk to each other? Just turn your faces and talk to each other. It makes your life easier. And it was not, it was not that easy. But then I realized, okay, there's some trust building that needs to happen for this collaboration to begin. So had to spend time individually with both of them, understand what were the underlying issues, what caused this not able to turn to each other and talk with each other. So had to do a lot of personal conversations with them, and then have them talk with each other, because that helped. Because if we don't build enough trust, and if we ask people to collaborate, that's going to hit a mountain and come back, right? It's not going to take roots. So it's important for a leader to identify, hey, are there issues that I need to get in and really solve it out for them, so that I build that foundation of trust, and then ensure for them to take on from there. That becomes very important. And I always keep a watch, right? It's not that I don't trust my managers or I don't trust my second level leadership. I give them the freedom to go ahead and build those trust, but I always keep a watch to see where can I come in if there is a need, so that further trust can build and people can collaborate. Because one thing I've always realized, when people collaborate, we have seen some amazing results, because the ideas, when they come together, each one coming with their strengths and build on it, it brings amazing results. And I keep telling this, I probably have spent more time helping the team work on collaboration than sitting on strategy meetings. But it has paid me off really well. Why? Because even if I take off for the next 10, 20 days, I don't need to worry, because I know I have a strong team that will manage the show. They are willing to take decisions, and I know most of their decisions would be in line with what I would be thinking in terms of keeping every other aspects in mind, because they're already groomed in that direction, because they spend time talking with each other, right? So that becomes another important aspect in my leadership style that I've used. And along with this, there's something else that goes, is when people collaborate, they get to learn from each other. And as they get to learn from each other, it becomes easier for me to move them around if there is a need for me to move them around, or if there is a support that, one person has to work in another team, really provide that support because another person is not there, then, it becomes a very agile team, right? We speak about agility now, and that's very, very critical for us, because on one side, we are always open. Hey, do you want to learn something new? Right? Nobody's going to stop. You want to learn something new, you want to try something new, a new process within the organization. We are always open to that idea, and we provide those opportunities for our team members so that they're able to, get cross-trained and be able to plug in at any processes wherever the organization needs them. And today, times are we need agile teams, right? We cannot survive on silo teams. There are cases where silo teams are useful, but more often we have seen agile teams thriving over the years, and that's something that I constantly keep my team, push them in that direction. And one other aspect is around leadership pipeline. It's absolutely important to create leadership pipeline, because I come from this tradition where people sometimes struggle to even share their chairs. We use those words to tell. They're so, they feel so threatened about somebody else taking over those positions, and we keep telling, no, that's not the right thing to do, right? And I'm so happy in the organization that I currently work at, Fidelity. We have created a strong leadership pipeline, and this goes very well with the quote Ram Charan, a world-renowned leadership speaker. He says in his book, The Leadership Pipeline, he says, strong leaders at all levels within an organization are a requisite for business success. Strong leaders at all levels within an organization are a requisite for business success. Now, this is a very important aspect for a leader. A genuine leader would never be threatened. I always believe in that. A genuine leader would never, ever be threatened. Why? Because genuine leader always looks for building other leaders. So when I have other leaders in my team who are getting groomed, as a leader, that gives me the greatest satisfaction, because I have a team that can stand up. I have a team that can give direction. I have a team that can provide all the support that is needed. So creating leadership pipeline is an important strategy for a leader, and it's almost another foundation for a leader. Now, there's a lot of hard stuff that we just spoke about. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication, a lot of patience in building what we just spoke about. But while we do all of this, it's absolutely important to celebrate, right? Many a times we forget about celebration as we are working on strategies and directions and guidance, but it's so important to celebrate the small wins and success. Now, why do we celebrate the small wins? And it goes with this beautiful saying by Paulo Coelho, a wonderful author that many of you must have read his books. He says, the great victory which appears so simple today was the result of series of small victories that went unnoticed, right? So small wins, when people get appreciated for those small wins, they are often, it ignites them, their momentum increases, they want to achieve more, right? They take off in a great way to create greater results for the organization. So whose responsibility is it? Who should appreciate? And I always believe it needs to begin from the leadership. It needs to begin from the top. And I keep a note of it at all times, and take time to appreciate my team members if with those small wins, because I've seen that when I've got appreciated in my own life over the years, I've seen it creates a greater inner motivation to take off and do even better for the organization. And through this, it's important to have fun. Right? Now, fun is a very important aspect. So what we have done in our organization also is connect people at passion level, right? When you connect people at passion level, life takes on, because people are connected at a passion level. They don't care, you call them on a Saturday to come and do some fun activity, they're super happy. So what we did was we said, okay, let's create culture clubs, right? And connect them at their passion level. So we identified what are certain areas where people can get connected at the passion level, and we brought in around 10 to 11 clubs. And these are clubs like biking club, theater club, cooking club, fishing club, hiking club, trekking, and multiple clubs. And we created those teams. People nominated. They loved the club, and they just got into the club, and they went out, did amazing stuff in their clubs, sent us photos, sent us certain narratives, which we then communicated across the organization. Now, people were super excited. They're like, wow, this, we have not seen this kind of culture that's getting built. And they were truly appreciative of these kind of activities. And what it showed me is to celebrate, right? We're celebrating by having fun, by going for an outing, by creating these clubs so that they can do together, right? Now people from different teams can come together. And we have had people come and say, hey, can I get my family also for this trekking? Because my wife would loves trekking. Can I get her? We're like, it's the club. Go ahead, do what you want there, have a wonderful time. Keep us posted in terms of communication so that we can share those celebrations outside for the organization, so that others can also be inspired and join these clubs. So this is an important aspect in our leadership style of how we can get people together and celebrate these small wins and successes. Now, just in summary, I keep telling, it does not matter, where I got my master's degree from, where I got my PhD degree from, if I've gotten a PhD degree. It does not matter which family line that I come from. It does not matter how much money that I have in my account. What really matters is, have I inspired someone today? Have I influenced someone today for greater good of the organization, of the team, of the family, of the community? Have I been a source of inspiration? And this is a foundation for me in my leadership journey. And over the years, and again, I go back to Diane D'Souza, who played that instrumental role in my life of showing all this just through her example. She never spoke to me about these things, but she lived a life right in front of me that I could observe and see, wow, this is great leadership. I really want to imitate these leadership. And over the years, it has really helped me to put in a lot of those examples and to be an example more than anything, to be an example and take the team forward, and through that take the organization forward. And it's a never-ending story, right? Leadership challenges will always be there, and how do you manage these challenges? It is definitely a question. And if you have gotten a strong team, if you have gotten a empowered team, most of these challenges can be addressed by just having conversations with them, bringing solutions together, and addressing it. So I, bring it to a conclusion here, and then open to any questions, and then take it forward from there. Thank you.
Wow, Varghese, you've shared such beautiful nuggets about leadership. It all sounds like the perfect scenario, but you also say that it's not easy and it takes time and it takes a lot of effort to build collaboration, but that then results in a team that you can totally depend on to do, wonders. So I do have quite a few things to ask, but I know that I'm sure there are questions from the audience also. So I'm going to first open it up to the audience and ask if there are questions that they want to ask you and know more, and then let's see what comes up. So if anybody has a question, feel free to ask. You can also put it in the chat and I can read it out. But you can also open your mic and let us hear your beautiful voice and your question.
Or we can start with the questions you have, Sushmita.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So you said, so often leaders talk about trust and collaboration, and it is something that takes a lot of time, right? What has your greatest challenge been? And have there been times when you felt like, this is not going anywhere, and, this is something that, I don't know if I got it right, or some of the greatest leadership challenges that you've had when you are holding this really strong principle around trust and collaboration in your teams?
Yeah, so see, one thing is absolutely important, right? Now, for example, the company that I worked previously, not the current company, but the previous company that I worked. Now, I joined the organization, and I got into the room. There were other team members there, and it was not an easy welcome, right? It was not an easy welcome, and I could feel, there was quite a lot of distance because I didn't know what was the context that I was getting into. I had two choices. One is to fight it. Two is to, take the flight. Right now, taking the flight is not my style, because this is a great leadership challenge. I really want to see how I can overcome. I took time individually connecting with each and every one of them, right? Very conscious effort. Now, I remember going and asking a couple of the team members then, hey, can we have lunch together, or can we talk? So, there would be times when they say, no, I have a meeting, I can't, let's do it later. I was like, okay, that's fine. I was totally respectful, because, trust building comes with a lot of patience, right? A lot of waiting. And it's important. Now, if I took a judgment call immediately, then my trust is further getting broken, right? First of all, it's new member into the team, so there's literally zero trust. And on top of it, if through these incidents, if I judge, it's going to be even more difficult to build trust. I was like completely fine with it. I said, absolutely not a problem. Let's connect whenever you feel, let me know. And many a times, like in a couple of those incidents, like 2 or 3 days, I just kind of waited, and they came back to me. They said, hey, let's go, let's have a conversation. Then we would just have a tea or coffee, talk. And talk is not about work. It's just about personal things, right? Where I come from, and family. It all started off from there. And I always believed when you connect at a personal level, you will also connect very strongly at a professional level, right? And I've always seen there is a deep connection to it, because I know there are groups of people who wouldn't want to connect at a personal level, want to keep it purely at a professional level. I understand that, I respect that. But what has worked for me over the years is, when you connect at a personal level, at a professional level, it can get even much, much stronger. So that's been my experience. So when I spend time, talking and interacting, and again, it doesn't build in just one meeting, right? A couple of the meetings. And I've also realized that when you help, when you support, when you work on some of their ideas that they have, and expand those ideas for greater good, the trust just goes 10 times more than what it used to be. Because I've realized, this one person has come back to me and told me that, Varghese, I have had this idea. I've spoken to 10 of my team members earlier. Nobody even cared for this idea. I just spoke to you once, and you took that idea and then engaged in a conversation with me on that idea, and then showed me what all we can do with that idea. I'm super impressed. I want to now bring more ideas. So I've had people come back to me with that. And all of this happens because a listening skill needs to be in time with it. So trust does not happen if we don't have patience. Trust does not happen if we don't take time for genuine listening, right? And to think good for the other person. Super important, right? What can I do for this person so that this person can move up, right? Scale up from a 1 to 2 or 3. If that thought process is inbuilt, then what happens for the other person is, hey, this person really is thinking good for me, right? Is thinking on behalf of me. So that person's trust will also start expanding and coming forward. This is something that I've always noticed, and it takes time. As I told, it takes patience. It takes a lot of non-judgmentality into it. So I think that's an important aspect that we got to build when we build trust.
Absolutely. So, I mean, definitely something that needs a lot of energy as well, right? Listening, trying to understand from a place of curiosity to build a good relationship and a genuine relationship. One thing that we often hear is also that a leader, especially at a level like yours, also has so many different things on your plate. How do you find time to connect with people at that individual level and build genuine relationships? And how many people are you able to do that with in a practical, way? So how would you then, what's the kind of energy that you actually spend on doing this every day? If you have to kind of apportion, you have 100% energy. This is the amount of energy I actually have for this, and I spend on this. So what's your sense of that? How do you find that stamina?
Yeah, so for me, my greatest energy that I derive from is people, right? So it makes it easier for me, because that's where, when I have a conversation with a person, there's a lot of energy that I derive through that conversation. So I can just go on for a couple of hours, very active, because I've had a wonderful conversation with a team member. So that's number one. And two, I go back to my own foundation, right? I go back to my own grooming. Whenever I wanted support, when I wanted help, my leaders were there for me. right? Whenever, right? When I was struggling initial years, I had to make a call to my leader and talk about a certain problem. They were there, right? Even though they were busy, they were there. Or they would say, Varghese, give me like 15 minutes, I'll call you back. They were there. And that has set such a lasting impression on me that it's so important to be available as a leader. Now, you're right, when you're in, the high level leadership position, there's so many things that we'll have to move around. Now, one thing I've always made a point, if you have empowered a strong team, then they can do most of that work as well, right? They can continue to inspire and influence people so that you don't need to take everybody's, concerns or try to manage everyone, because that on the long run is not the right approach as well. So that's where an empowering a strong team who can then continue to inspire influence will definitely help. But at the same time, as a leader, I'm not sure how many leaders would practice the same thing, because I've seen in certain organizations there's a lot of hierarchy, right? At a CHRO levels or at a C-suite levels, they wouldn't engage with people at a managerial level or even below the managerial level. There's no connection at all. But that, it goes back to what I said. Leadership is not titles at all, right? Yes, there are titles for a certain purpose, but it's about what is the influence, what is the inspiration that you create. Now, if that becomes the foundation, and if that is the foundation in my life, then what happens is automatically there is time. I find time, right? I create those spaces for people so that that impact can happen. And all of this is connected to my value system. And I saw one of the questions around, how do you integrate value-driven leadership? Now, because of these value systems, that's where I'm able to provide and create spaces for such initiatives, for such inspirations to happen amongst our team members. And again, it goes back to beautiful stories over the years of how people have taken time, not just to listen to you, not just to give you feedback, not just to help you from point A to point B, but who are invested in you. That makes a massive difference, right? And this is part of my value system. My being here is to impact the organization positively, right? And to help my team members grow, to help my team members gain wisdom, to help my team members become leaders for the organization. And for all of this, yes, there's a lot of sacrifices that I have to make in terms of, wherever I had to need to cut certain time so that I'm able to spend this quality time. That has happened. I'm just being very, very honest. That has happened. It has taken a toll on some of the family things that I could have done. It has taken a toll, but then I'm also learning there of how to manage time effectively there, and how to take off, vacations, and ensure that I spend really quality time with my family. But at the same time, when this entire value system is part of your family value system also, it makes it a lot more easier, because then the family is also committed to be an inspiration to others, to be an influence to others. So values become super critical, and it's important we take time, because we are doing a training now for our senior managers, and one of the questions that we are asking them is, what are the values that you're driven with, right? Because a lot of things happens through your values. Now, if your values, say, for example, if one of my value at the top to be is very comfortable, right? Then it will be difficult for me to meet challenging situations. It will be very, very difficult, because I want to be very comfortable, right? I want to be away from all the problems in life. Now, it becomes very difficult if that becomes your value system, right? It becomes difficult for you to grow within your leadership level. So we are rechecking some of those value systems, helping our managers to understand why value systems are critical. Yeah.
Great response, Varghese, on that one. Kuam's question. So we have a question from Neha. How do we as HRs empower managers to deal with biased leadership, narcissist bosses, and C-suite guys who only believe in hire and fire people?
Yes, so it is a challenge. To Sushmita, the point that you asked, what were some challenges that you see across organizations? Yes, this is Neha. This is a question, a very valid question. And again, you're right. There's a lot of awareness creation needs to happen right from the top, from the leadership levels. And the first 4 years that I've been in this organization, wonderful organization, And huge praises for our leaders here, because we have been very, very clear. When we hire people, it's really important to invest in them, right? When COVID happened, especially we were okay with 2021 in terms of the job market, but when it came to 23, our volumes dried out really quick, right? Because the interest rates in America was very high, and our volumes dropped to the bare minimum. But one thing that we decided as a leadership team, along with my boss Andy Giddings, a lovely leader, is that we are not going to fire any employee. We were very clear about it, right? See what you can do as a team. So he gave us a heads up, well before he saw the market going down. He gave us a heads up. All the leaders came together. We started discussing different aspects. Where can we cut cost, right? Not to fire people, but where can we cut cost so that we have money to still run the organization, sustain the organization through these difficult times. So there was a lot of cuts that was done where it didn't impact the employees directly at all, right? Now, we did that. That was one. So, for example, we said, okay, all the leadership travels cut, right? We kept it bare minimum. If a leader was coming, then we made sure the leader is getting business. So that was the call of the leadership team at that time. So it was restricted there. 1, 2, we said we are keeping sabbaticals open. If any employee wants to take sabbatical, 6 months, 4 months, they want to take off because they probably have something to do with the family, they want to take off for some time, we gave that option. And we had close to 100 plus employees taking sabbatical, right? And when they came back, jobs were there waiting for them. So we ensured, and not just that, we also ensured that we will not, do anything on the hike. We will continue to provide the hike. And that year, even when the volumes were at the bare minimum, we still gave 2-digit hike. When most of our competitors by then had already either announced there won't be a hike for the next year, or their PMCR process was delayed, their performance process was delayed. We saw a lot of things happening in the market during that time, but the call that we took, because we value people, right? Because we all know that employees are looking forward for the month of April, because they know that 1 year down the line, they're going to get a hike, and they would have planned, they would have had their own dreams. So we were very sure about that we will cut costs in other places so that we have sizable amount of money that we are able to provide hike for our employees. So that's a call that we took of, and again, Neha, to your question, there was a lot of awareness at the top level, right? And for leaders to listen to each other, to talk to each other and understand, yes, I think this is the way we got to go. And we were able to do that because I think there's a shared value system in the organization, right? And across the leadership level, the value system is held very strongly. And I think that probably helped us to think in a direction that impacts the employees positively, right? And that helps the employees positively. So I think it's a lot of communication, it's a lot of talking, and HR has a role to play there in terms of bringing those conversations up and having those conversations up. And I've known there are organizations when HR brings such a conversation up, it is not encouraged. It is either shut down immediately. But I think it's important for the HR leader to have meet with leaders individually wherever you feel there is an individual attention that needs to be done to tilt it in the positive direction, and then bring it more into a group conversation. So I think different strategies, different sizes needs to be done towards creating this kind of culture, so that becomes a lot more easier. As I told again, not an easy journey. It takes time, and especially if leaders have been in the system for n number of years, then it's even not easier, right? It gets even more difficult. And I think that's one area where we've also told for employees to, within our leadership team, to also hire leaders from outside, because they give you a different perspective, they give you a different thinking that becomes important.
Thanks, Varghese. Neha, I see your hand up. I'm not sure if it was for this question, but or do you have a follow-up question on this?
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Varghese, for acknowledging the question and answering it so beautifully. I think I'm a part of the organization which thinks, the otherwise, as you said, that it's a difficult conversation, and the leaders have to be at the same page when they are battling a situation like this, where there is a hire or where there is a fire situation. But what I feel and my journey has been that the CHRO of my company is unable to voice their opinion to the senior leadership. They are pretty biased. They usually have discussions in the boardrooms in which HRs are not invited or involved, and we are just told to shoot out the emails that this is what the management has decided, this is what the leadership has decided. Usually, they are not involved in any business related decision, and we are at the firing line for all the employees because the emails go out from us, they come to us for all the questions. And so yeah, I totally agree with you that the leadership at the helm has to be very well thought and very people oriented. Unfortunately, not all organizations are like that. A follow-up question to this is, how do we deal with managers who already have bias in their minds? Like if they don't like a person at a senior manager level, they will find somebody from the network who will be doing the same work for them but at a lower cost, and then they would ask HR to find faults with that person and fire him eventually in 3 to 4 months and get this other person at a lower cost in his position. How do we, and we know as HR that's completely wrong, that's unethical, but because the leadership is biased and they have had difficult, and they have had they have run into troubled waters with that the other person, and they want to fire him on these grounds, how do we deal with that?
Thank you, Neha. Not an easy question to answer, a very difficult question. Now, see, bias is something that's there across industry, right? It's there pretty much everywhere. We talk about community, family, organizations, and when it affects a person's job, it's painful, right? When someone loses a job because of a bias of the leader or the manager, it's not an easy take. And what is important here is, see, what we have done over the years is really trained our leadership team, our managerial team on many aspects, right? Whether you're talking about unconscious bias, whether we're talking about making good decisions, whether we're talking about problem solving, conflict transformation. These are skills that we have spent a lot of time over the years training, because these are life skills. People say work life, but I say it's life. Everything is part of life, right? Work is also part of life. And to have those necessary conversations becomes super critical. And one thing, we have made sure here is, if we have to fire anyone, right? If there is on the grounds of insubordination or on the grounds of behavior, now there should be very, very strong justification, right? Now, HR has a bigger say here, because HR will get into that investigation, will look at the issue from multiple angles before a decision gets made. Now, sometimes the decision may be not favorable to a manager who is bringing the issue to you, right? Sometimes the decision would go against what the manager wanted, because there is no proper ground on which the manager is asking to fire someone. So we are very particular, and the managers know that, and they're also operating in a way that there is bias at any cost that needs to be broken. It's not, I'm not saying that there is no bias in the organization. I've had employees reaching out to me over the years saying, I think this manager is biased only for people from a certain region, right? And, against the others. We took it up. I took it up. I spoke to the vertical head of that particular department. I said, hey, I'm hearing something about something like this. I would want you to take a look at it. Now, that leader immediately stepped up the game, started looking, started investigating it, and have had a serious conversation with the manager. And more than anything, to create awareness, because many a times that is there, right? Because even when you interview someone, and that the person that you're interviewing studied in the same school that you studied in the same college that you studied, or probably the same teacher that taught you is also taught that person. Unconsciously, a bias steps in, right? And most of the cases, that person would be a select, right? Even if there is another person who studied totally in a different place, totally in a different state altogether, and has better skills than the person that you just interviewed earlier, our bias will take us onto this direction. Now, that's a very, it's a happy going bias there, but still, it's a bias there, right? Now, what we have done over the years is really sensitized our managers. How do you deal with problems? How do you deal with conflict? It's okay if people have a different thought process. If people have a different way of doing things. It's okay if people have a different, perspective that is totally in contrast with your perspective. Take time to listen. Take time to decode it. Take time. Why does that person have this perspective? So I think that's the push we are giving all our managers, right? And we constantly give the push back to them. We simply ask them some question, send them back, and for them to go back, do the homework again. And many a times that homework doesn't come back to us, right? Because they have realized they made a mistake and they close it off. They come back and say, hey, Varghese, no problem. They've taken care. There's no issue. It's taken care, right? So we have seen people moving off from a decision they thought was good, but then later on realized there were bias involved in that decision. Yeah.
Thanks, Varghese. I think we have very less time, but I'm just going to ask you to extend your response to even Sam's question where he says, so in your leadership programs, there are different distinct needs of emerging leaders, mid-level managers, senior executives, etc., even within the same level, actually. So how do you meet those needs when they're distinct?
Yeah, so we try our level best not to bring all of them together, right? Especially all these levels together, because the needs definitely are different, and the intensity of the problem each of these levels deal are also different. So we cater programs specific to levels. Now, for example, we're taking a group of senior managers and assistant vice presidents because that's the very next level. So it's okay even if the needs are different, because it becomes a learning for the senior managers to understand what an assistant vice president deals with. So we are now taking them through a program. It's going to be a 2-day residential program, and plus there's going to be a 30-day of project that they'll be working on together as teams. Now, this is for that level. We also had programs for the team lead levels, right? Now, that's very different compared to an assistant vice president levels. So our programs are catered, one, need-based, and along with that attached would be the level base. And there are times when we got to have just a conversation. So we get everyone together because it's a meaningful conversation. They can all learn from each other, a very unstructured conversation, but it normally moves to something very concrete. In those times, those kind of situations, it's kind of kept open. But otherwise, all of our training programs are catered to specific levels, specific needs. Sometimes we bring maybe 2 levels together because we see, there is a connect. There's a deep connect. They can learn from each other. Yeah.
And I want to just probably close with Aparajita's question before we ask you for your last words. But what is your biggest joy as a leader?
When I see people moving up, in terms of their growth, in terms of their wisdom, in terms of how they are able to solve problems, and the kind of directions they are able to give for their team members, that gives me the greatest joy. Yeah.
Thanks, Varghese. And what do you want to leave us all with? What's the one last thought? If that was one thing you wanted to offer us, what would it be?
So I would go back to this quote by John Maxwell. He says, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. I'll say it again. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I think this has been my bedrock and has really helped me over the years, consciously taking time to influence people positively.
And I think you've done a wonderful job of influencing us today in this 1 hour and giving us beautiful little pearls of wisdom to take back with us. So we are all very grateful to you. And thank you everybody else who's been present here in this 1 hour and been with us to have this conversation with Varghese. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Varghese, for your valuable time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.